Oh, hi there. Welcome to part 2 of the Urban Myths and Legends Iceberg. In this part, we're getting a lot more obscure and more creepy, so strap yourselves in for some urban myths and legends that are sure to make you laugh or leave you up at night. The Hat Man. The Hat Man is a tall, black, shadowy figure wearing a black-brimmed hat. Some reports say he also wears a trench coat. Most people see the Hat Man in their dreams. People that suffer with sleep paralysis often say he lurks in the corners of their vision, just watching them while they sleep at night or try and sleep at night. As well as in dreams, the Hat Man is also seen by people on medicine that might make them drowsy. There was a TikTok challenge. I do not advise anyone does this before I even say it. There was a TikTok challenge where people take large doses of Benadryl in an attempt to feel drowsy and try and meet the Hat Man. This TikTok challenge, and also through creepypastas found on Reddit and 4chan, have made the Hat Man notorious. It seems like if you take Benadryl in high doses or perhaps experience sleep paralysis, your mind can sort of hallucinate and put things there. And it's very strange that a lot of people agree that they see this Hat Man-like figure. I would argue that shadows around a bedroom when you're in a hallucinatory state can sort of look like anything, and your mind can play tricks on you and create shapes out of shadows that are really just blocky, and this shape could easily be a man in a brimmed hat wearing a trench coat. Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer. Ted Cruz, a Republican senator, also has his own podcast now. Who the hell is listening to that? Well, in 2010, a tweet went viral just claiming that Ted Cruz was the Zodiac Killer. And the Zodiac Killer is a pseudonym for a serial killer who murdered at least 5 people in the Bay Area in California between 1968 and 1969. I'm sure you know the Zodiac Killer, but it's such a famous case because the killer left cryptograms for the police and the media as clues. Most of the cryptograms and the case itself remains unsolved. But in 2010, people started to point towards Ted Cruz being the Zodiac Killer. People compared this sketch from a witness to Ted Cruz himself and said how similar they actually look. Also, if you decode this bumper sticker from when Cruz ran for president in 2016, we seem to have a confession. People on the internet think Ted Cruz is weird and creepy, and that's why sort of this meme has spread around. It obviously doesn't hold any truth. I think the fact that Ted Cruz was born in 1970, just 2 years after the murders, probably put him in the clear. If Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer, then it's pretty incredible that he managed to murder 5 people before he was even born. In the Air Tonight. In the Air Tonight is an iconic tune from Phil Collins. And if you're from the UK, you know that drum solo from the Cadbury's advert, the gorilla who plays that solo to perfection. People say that the 1981 song is written about Phil Collins watching a man drown and refusing to save him. People point to the lyrics, "If you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a helping hand." Well, that does sound like a complete admission to letting someone drown. But if you actually listen to the song, great song, by the way, it's so emotional. Collins says himself, it's about his divorce. He was going through a divorce at the time, and I suppose that's a great way to describe a divorce, when you fall out of love with someone and have so much disdain for them that he wouldn't even help his to-be ex-wife if she was drowning. It's really interesting how this one spread because it's pre-internet era, so people would just have to interpret the song in their own way, and this rumor would spread word of mouth. I suppose people would love to tell a dramatic backstory about a song to their friends, rather than it just being a simple breakup song. Lavender Town Syndrome. How would you react if in 1996 there was a town in a Pokemon game that was driving children to school? Or from Pokemon's Red and Green in 1996, this is exactly what people said was happening. In the town, Lavender Town, once you step inside, there is an eerie music that you hear. It's said that the music in Lavender Town features eerie high-pitched tones that would lead children to having sleep paralysis, insomnia, rage, and even suicidal tendencies. Well, seeing as you're watching an Urban Myths video, you probably won't be surprised to know that that actually is not completely true. In 2010, this story actually started from a creepypasta that someone posted on 4chan. The viral story went around the web, and people even said, they've actually changed the music since, and on the more Western European and American versions of the game, they never even had the music in. It was only the original Japanese game that featured this eerie music. But if you try and look for any cases, you will not find any children driven to insanity from going into Lavender Town. But perhaps it's a ploy and Pokemon are working with the Japanese government to cover it up. Who knows? Max Headroom broadcast intrusion. Max Headroom was a TV show from the 80s. It was made in Britain, and it was basically a guy who was said to be the first AI or computer-generated TV presenter. He would tell the news in a very humorous way, and it was a very cyberpunk, quite popular, ahead of its time show, I guess. Well, on November the 22nd, 1987, someone interrupted the broadcast of a football game live and displayed themselves as this Max Headroom character.
Because he's a freaking nerd. I think I've got Chips Worsky working with oh, Jesus.
You can see here, you can barely understand what they're saying, but they're rambling about something or other, and then the video gets really quite strange.
Coming to get me!
The first hijacking came to WGN-TV, a local station in Chicago, and they interrupted the broadcast for about 30 seconds. There was then a second one over Doctor Who on another Chicago news channel, WTTW. They interrupted that broadcast for about 90 seconds. Both these intrusions happened on the same day, only a few hours apart. The FBI put out a $250,000 reward for anyone who could catch these broadcast intruders. Despite the $250,000 reward, no culprit was ever found. It's theorized that the hijackers must have had pro-level ham radio gear, and they would have broadcast their feed out using stronger microwave signals than the stations were at the time, and simply hijacked the antennas and the towers. Now, at the time in Chicago, people didn't know who Max Headroom was. It was a famous British TV show, as I mentioned. So people thought that it literally was maybe an alien race hijacking their TV signal, or even someone actually from the future. How bizarre though, if someone hijacked your TV signal from the future and they just started getting spanked on the signal. That was what they wanted to show the human race. Devil's Kettle. The Devil's Kettle is a waterfall in Minnesota where the Brule River splits. The east side flows down a waterfall with a 50-foot drop. Pretty normal for a waterfall, but the west side forks into a huge pothole, and it then seemingly vanishes. Visitors toss sticks and ping pong balls into the west fork, and none of these items ever appear downstream of the river, fueling a decade-long mystery as to where this goes, some theorizing that perhaps it's a portal. The geographical explanation to all of this is that because it is a waterfall, it has created a pothole type erosion, and it literally does go into the ground, and it creates its own cave-like system, and the river flows on underground and rejoins miles down the line. Now, why objects disappear? It's likely because of the force that all the water is falling. If you're throwing a stick down there, the stick's going to explode into pieces, maybe even ping pong balls, or often they're getting trapped in the cave as it flows downstream. Eliza Lamb, or the elevator game. We had in the first episodes, I think there was 2 entries about elevators, and I actually mentioned Eliza Lamb. Eliza Lamb was a Canadian student who went on holiday to California, and she stayed in the Cecil Hotel. There's a Netflix documentary, if you've not seen it, probably the most anticlimactic Netflix documentary you can possibly see. Anyway, there's a Korean elevator game where if you press the buttons on the elevator, supposedly the order is 1, 2, then 6, 2, then 10, then 5, then 1, it opens a portal to a different realm. Well, Eliza Lamb got into the elevator, and viral CCTV footage shows Eliza Lamb going into the elevator, but it never shows her leaving on any other floors. From the CCTV footage, people say that Eliza Lamb is acting paranoid. That's why people theorize perhaps she was playing this ancient game. If you've seen the Netflix documentary, obviously Eliza Lamb was found in the water tanker on the roof. Now, police confirmed in the reports that there was no foul play. There was no evidence of her being assaulted or anything like that. She was actually, in fact, bipolar, and she was off her medication at the time. Perhaps this is a reason that we can see some strange behavior here, and ultimately her accidental death. Epstein didn't himself. Well, if you're a subscriber, we know about Epstein didn't himself. I've released a whole long form video on this. You can check it out if you want to know more. But essentially, it's seen as an internet meme that Epstein didn't himself, but there's a batch of evidence. There are so many coincidences in this case that it's almost comical, like the guards being asleep and the cell cameras malfunctioning at the exact time that Epstein was said to have himself. Also, Epstein's cellmate, who looks like a guy who could be capable of killing someone, was transferred out a day before. Epstein's brother even hired his own pathologist to take another autopsy as he wasn't happy with the results of the first autopsy. The second autopsy showed that the breaks around the bones or on Epstein's neck, I think to the collarbones and some of the more fractal, smaller neck bones, were broken in such a way that isn't really consistent with hangings. They're said to be more typical in homicidal strangulation cases. The government, of course, remains solid on this, that no, that is the correct autopsy. We didn't make any mistakes. He himself. That's how it went down. I go over in my full video about this. You need motive, means, and opportunity to kill someone. Just to look at the motive, there was enough people involved and embroiled in this guy's crimes that would have also gone down that it benefits a lot of people to get him out of the equation and not have him testify. Urkhammer, Iowa. Urkhammer was a small town in Iowa with a fully thriving population that was said to have just completely vanished in the 1930s. There are many towns like this throughout American history. I believe in the first episode we have Doveland in Wisconsin. People theorized that towns like this were used as CIA experiments, and then when the experiment goes wrong, they simply clear the town. They wipe out everyone in the town, they get rid of it, they make it a complete ghost town, and even erase it from all maps. Now, this is a key feature. We have stories popping up online of people that swear to be from Urkhammer. We have people walking through the area and finding like a lone bathtub just in the middle of a farmer's field that was supposedly left behind. And stories of an Esso truck driver in the 30s that knew there was a town nearby where he had broken down. So he decided to walk to reach Urkhammer and then ended up walking forever because Urkhammer was simply gone. The earliest version of Urkhammer appears in a 2015 creepypasta story where a guy shares tales from his mother that was supposedly sent to him via email. He claims that his mother claims to be from Urkhammer, but there's no traces of the town whatsoever. Like I say, there is no reports of Urkhammer ever showing up on a map or a rail route or anything like that. I think this is likely just a creepypasta started in 2015. 5G. Ah yes, 5G. This is a very modern one. I remember this. You probably do too. 5G had a wider spread rollout in around 2019 when COVID was starting. Now, a lot of groups, it was always Facebook. It was always Facebook mums sharing these long posts that claim perhaps 5G is the cause of the COVID-19 outbreak. In the UK, it was quite widespread for these 5G towers to be destroyed through arson attacks, or near where I lived, I remember someone scaled one and started smashing it with a hammer. Surely that's like not good though, because you'd be releasing all the COVID-19 into the air if you're destroying it with a hammer. I don't know how they think, but yeah, this is a really recent one, and I'm sure you remember it as well as I do. It goes without saying that the 5G towers don't cause COVID-19. That was actually made in a lab. Sailing stones. Sailing stones are boulders that weigh up to 300 pounds in Death Valley. In the racetrack player of Death Valley, these stones mysteriously move along the ground, leaving a track behind them. This phenomenon was first documented in 1915, and the early theories were simply wind moving the rocks, perhaps a magnetic field, or even aliens. It wasn't until 2014 that scientists actually discovered the reason for these rocks moving up to 1,500 feet at a time. A scientific team led by Laurie and Lorena Jackson attached GPS devices to 60 different rocks in the racetrack playa. And it was in 2014 where a rare flash freeze of Death Valley saw movement to these stones. It was discovered that this thin sheet of ice left on the Death Valley floor, only 4 millimeters thick, was puddling behind these stones, and then the wind would pick up and eventually be able to move these stones along. Because the ice was so thin, the rocks would create a track along the desert floor, and then when the flash floods would stop and the sun would come out and all the ice would melt, the tracks would remain. The myth lived on for so long because the flash floods were so uncommon in Death Valley, so it took a long time to actually have an event where people could observe these rocks moving along the desert floor. Ninjin. Ninjins are huge Japanese sea creatures in cryptid folklore. They're described as being up to 90 foot long, and they have like human-like front half of the body and a whale-like back of the body. There was actually some photos supposedly snapped of some in 2006 and 2007. These photos emerged on 2chan, and they're supposedly captured by whalers, some Japanese fishermen who hunt for whales, and they captured these while out in the waters of the Antarctic Ocean. People say the Japanese government have been covering these up for many years, and these blurry photos that appeared on 2chan are the only evidence that we have. Debunkers say it's likely a picture of a whale that has been edited in some way. Rock ape. The rock ape refers to a bipedal ape-like figure that was seen by Vietnamese and American soldiers during the Vietnam War. It gained the name rock ape because it was known for hurling rocks at people. In 1968, Marines in the Dong Den base in Vietnam reported nightly barrages of rocks falling down on them while they tried to sleep. Private Richard Zampradi, who stayed at that base, reported seeing a muscular, broad-shouldered figure walking upright. Local folklore matches these reports, as the Vietnamese have a cryptid called the Batutu, which is a similar hairy wild man that is the protector of the woods. Skeptics point to black langurs, which is a monkey that is native to Vietnam that is also known for throwing rocks. So perhaps the culprit was a small little monkey rather than a 6-foot bipedal ape-like figure. Annabelle the Doll. Maybe the most legendary doll of all time, Annabelle the Doll is said to have been haunting people since the 1970s. A nursing student, Donna, got the doll for her 28th birthday, and it was within weeks her and her roommate Angie noticed the doll moving around rooms without either of them touching it. It started off moving from the bed to maybe the sofa in the living room, her knees being bent tucked and then being straight forward. They didn't think much of this until it started to appear with notes written next to it that read things like "Help me." The two girls hired a medium to perform a seance on the doll. The medium said a spirit of a 7-year-old Annabelle Higgins was trapped inside the doll. After the seance, the spookiness around the doll got worse, with one of the girls' boyfriends coming over to stay and waking up in the middle of the night with scratch marks on his face. This was indeed put down to the doll. There was also other attacks reported. Another investigator came to look at the doll, and he also claimed to have been scratched, leaving 7 nail scars on his face. Ed and Lorraine Warren, who owned a museum of haunted artifacts, took the doll into their custody and put it behind a piece of glass in 1972. The glass case had a huge "Do Not Open" sign on it, as they didn't want the spirit to be able to escape. The museum closed in 2019 after Lorraine Warren's death, and it said that the doll is currently in storage. The Annabelle doll is world famous now because of the Conjuring movie series and the Annabelle trilogy itself, with all the movies grossing over $1 billion in cinemas. Because of the doll's fame, people would visit the Warrens Museum just to see the doll, and many people reported banging on the glass of the doll and then waking up the next day with scratch marks on their face. There's also been rumors that during the 2025 LA fires, the doll has supposedly escaped. So be careful and watch out for this doll. Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is a werewolf-like cryptid seen on Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Sightings date back to the 1930s, and it's described exactly like a werewolf. People say it's between 6 and 7 foot tall, and it's a bipedal wolf-like man with shaggy grey or brown fur and glowing yellow eyes. First sighting from 1936 was from Mark Sheckelman, who said he saw a man with a tail eating a cow's carcass. The legend lived on as sightings exploded in 1989 all the way through to 1996, when a journalist, Linda Godfrey, in weekly press reports, reported over 140 witnesses seeing the beast. None of these witnesses reported human attacks, they were all attacks on livestock. In 92, farmer Doris Gibson found one of her horses with 12-inch prints all around the horse, and it had been absolutely slashed open by some kind of beast. More recently, in 2006, a hunter said he saw a beast jumping through the air, but it had human-like feet as it went across his sight path. Like many cryptids, the Beast of Bray Road has captured locals' imaginations, with stories living on for nearly 100 years now. Skeptics point out that Bray Road is a deer corridor, so perhaps a number of beasts can be seen trying to mutilate cattle or even deer in the area, and in the dark, these could be mistaken for a beast that is like a werewolf, whether it's a coyote, a wolf, maybe even wolves with mange, or some say even misidentified bears. Teke Teke. Teke Teke is yet another Japanese urban legend. The story goes that in the 1970s, a schoolgirl who fell onto some train tracks had her legs chopped off by the train. The girl now haunts railway stations, crawling along with her arms at up to speeds of 150 miles an hour. I laugh because that's just insane. That would be insane to see. Someone crawling along at 150 miles an hour just on their arms. The name Teke Teke comes from the fact that when she's crawling along, it makes a teke teke sound. She approaches people at railway stations at night, asking, "Where are my legs?" And if you don't give her an appropriate answer, she will pull out a scythe and do the same thing to you, chopping off your torso from your lower half. The story spread through newspapers in the 1970s in Japan, and the tale lives on today to watch out while you're at a railway station alone at night. To be honest, not a bad message, that one. Vaccine microchips. Vaccine microchips is yet another COVID-era urban myth, where people thought that the COVID-19 vaccine rollout was also that Bill Gates could put a microchip inside of us. Traces go back to March 2020 when Bill Gates was talking about some kind of vaccine passport, and people mistranslated that to being the vaccine was going to be some kind of insertable digital passport. It was going to be embedded in us through the COVID-19 vaccine. People thought that the implant was going to be something so that the government or the elites of the world could track our every movement, while also maybe even being able to read our minds. Now, amazingly, when I was doing research for this is shocking, you're not going to believe this. Apparently 28% of Americans believed this theory in 2020. That's nuts. I mean, I can't believe that. This was according to a YouGov survey. 28% of Americans believed this. I don't believe that. I think what we learned from that is the people doing YouGov surveys are absolute idiots. Green Children of Woolpit. The Green Children of Woolpit is from my country, the great nation of England, where in 1150, a girl and a boy came wandering out of the woods with green skin. It's said that they spoke a completely unknown language and only ate a diet of green beans. They were taken in by a man of the name Sir Richard D. Calney, who took the children in and raised them, slowly feeding them a normal diet and also teaching them English. After eating a normal diet and learning English, they gradually lost their green hue and became integrated into village life. People from the village theorized that these children escaped a twilight-lit, alternate kind of reality, and they passed through a portal into this realm through a cave that was in the woods. Now, interestingly, this case has two primary sources. From the 12th century, we have two chroniclers who basically just reported local events. At the time, we have William of Newbury and Ralph of Cogshill, who reported the children, describing them independently 30 years apart. They both noted the green skin of the children, and they had strange diets and also wore strange clothes. It said that the girl and boy were baptized, and the boy unfortunately died shortly after this baptism, while the girl went on to live a long and healthy life. During this time in medieval England, fairy folklore was sort of really popular, so that's why this story spread. And now it is actually believed that these children were real. Having the two chroniclers sort of verify as primary sources is quite strong evidence. The green skin can be explained through an anemia. Maybe they had an iron deficiency, causing people to have a slight green, grayish hue to their skin, which is something these children would definitely have if they were living on a diet of like green beans and they were completely malnourished. And they were actually children left over from the Flemish immigrant massacres of 1173, which all happened nearby. So yeah, basically they could have been orphaned medieval Flemish children who were escaped to the woods, lived on a diet of beans, got a iron deficiency and anemia, and were eventually taken in by some English villagers who thought they were fairies. Pretty wholesome urban myth, this one, I think. Catapulted cats. Catapulted cats comes from 525 BC, where Persian king Cambyses II is said to have used cats in his battle to take down the Egyptians. At the time, it was seen as a psychological warfare move, as of course the Egyptians worshipped cats. When Persian forces invaded Egypt, they first attacked the fortress Pelusium. Knowing that the Egyptians worshipped cats, they used cats as a shield, and perhaps some even say put them in catapults and launched them over the walls into the fortress. Egyptian archers were so terrified of these cat shields that they refused to fire arrows, as they didn't want to kill a cat, as that meant life in eternal hell for the Egyptians. Polyanis's work is seen as a collection of anecdotes, mostly fictional. It can't be sort of put down as strict history. The historian at the time, Herodotus, doesn't mention this strategy ever being used by the Persians. But either way, this is an ancient, literally an ancient urban myth. CERN created a black hole. So the European Organization of Nuclear Research, known as CERN, supposedly have created a black hole. The conspiracy theory claims that using the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC for short, they can basically use this to generate planet-eating black holes. And that's exactly what they're doing on Earth. People say they're creating these mini black holes on Earth, deep underground, so that they can enter them, and they're like portals to different places, even portals to hell, some people may suggest. But I'm no scientist, and I'm actually like really bad at science. I don't understand science at all. But I'm pretty sure if you were to magic up a black hole underground on the planet Earth, it would slowly swallow us, or maybe quickly swallow us. I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure it's scientifically impossible to have a black hole on the planet itself. I mean, any scientists that happen to be watching my dumb content, please enlighten me on that. Microwaved baby. Microwave baby refers to another one of these email chains that goes around where people are warning of a local babysitter perhaps that looks after your children and decides to put your child in the microwave. I vaguely remember this. I feel like I've heard this when I was a lot younger. People claiming a friend of a friend or someone they know told them that someone they know has had their baby put in a microwave by a babysitter, which is utterly insane. And why this is an urban myth that spreads, unfortunately, this isn't something that has never happened. In 2005 in Ohio, babysitter China Arnold put a 28-day-old Paris Tally in the microwave for more than 2 minutes. This horrific act caused the baby to go into organ failure and unfortunately pass away, and China Arnold was convicted of aggravated murder in 2011. In 2004 in Virginia, Elizabeth Oat put her 1-month-old child in the microwave for 10 minutes. In court, she claimed as a defense that she had an epileptic fit, causing the baby to be slipped into the microwave, the door closed, whacking 10 minutes on and clicking start. Somehow that all happens in an epileptic fit. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison under manslaughter because of the supposed epileptic fit. And more recently in California in 2011, Kat Yang put her own child in the microwave again for just about 5 minutes. And she actually tried to use the same defense. Her defense claimed that she had a seizure, slipping the baby into the microwave during this seizure and accidentally turning it on. This time, the defense was rejected and she received a life sentence. There's only ever been 10 cases worldwide of this ever happening. So it's kind of crazy how this story spread. I think because it's so shocking. Even if you heard of one of these cases that has happened, it's so shocking. People are inclined to spread it. And it's that interesting aspect of human psychology where people want to add the detail that it was a friend of a friend to make themselves somehow feel closer to the story. Columbine Doom Level. Columbine Doom Level refers to Eric Harris, one of the 1999 Columbine high school shooters. The theory claims that he created a layout of his school as a doom map so he could practice before massacring 13 and injuring 24 others. It was confirmed that Harris had a Doom obsession. He posted his own created maps online. He had Doom books, And he also said in a video that the shooting was going to be like a level of Doom. He also said on video that the shotgun he was going to use was just like the shotgun out of Doom. Classmates of Harris alleged to police that they heard him bragging that he had created a high school layout level on Doom and he was using it to practice massacres. A classmate told investigators that Harris bragged to him about creating a layout of the school in Doom. However, when they checked Harris's hard drive, there was no such level to be found. There was more than 5 of his own created levels, and one of them was of a different student's house, which is obviously quite strange and haunting, but there was never a level of the school found. Because of these links to Doom, people heard the story and referenced it as if it was fact, but there is in fact no proof that he ever had a high school Doom level on his hard drive. Al Gore invented the internet. Now, Al Gore inventing the internet is kind of an urban myth that Al Gore himself planted. In a 1999 interview with CNN, Gore said, and I quote, "I took the initiative in creating the internet." He was referencing the fact that during his time in Congress, he passed a bill. He actually co-authored a bill called the High Performance Computing Act. It was also known as the Gore Bill. This act essentially provided loads of funding to NERN, which was the backbone for commercializing the internet for public use. While perhaps Gore deserves credit for the coming around of the internet, the fact that in this interview he stated it like he was the one coding the internet, he was the man behind the release of the internet, it's been memed so many times since as an example of how politicians overinflate all their achievements and accomplishments. Owlman. Owlman is a cryptid first spotted in Cornwall, England in the 70s. Owlman is described as being 5 foot tall, having a human-like build with wings, giant talons and claws, glowing red eyes, black feathers, and being silent in flight. Now, this case is like really localized, like really localized, not just from Cornwall, England, but in one specific churchyard. In the Mornon churchyard, it was first spotted in 1976 by 2 sisters aged 11 and 14 at the time. They said they saw a giant feathered owl circling the church tower during an Easter campout. Just 150 yards away in the same year, a Frenchman and 2 teens also saw reports of the Owlman. Over the years, there have been many more reports of a giant owl, like man, let's call him Owlman, seen flying around the clock tower of the church. Now, interestingly, skeptics break this down to simply being an owl. A real owl, not an owl man, just an owl. When owls are flying and they fully extend their wings, they can have huge wingspans. Maybe not quite like 5 foot, but pretty close. And a clock tower of a church is a pretty good nesting place for an owl. And they only come out at night. So in the dark, you know, you might easily be confused. It's the whole pareidolia thing that we had in the last episode. And we're going to have it again, where your mind plays tricks on you and it fills in gaps. Almost you see what you want to see. Red Bull contains bull semen. Red Bull containing bull semen is a pretty consistent urban myth that sort of revives itself every now and then. I think I've heard this one in my life, definitely when I was a kid. It went around, and there's actually kind of a reason that sparks it. Obviously, Red Bull have the bull as their logo, and there's an ingredient in Red Bull and in Monster Energy, probably a lot of other energy drinks, called taurine. Now, taurine comes from the Latin word taurus, which does mean bull. And taurine is a chemical that's sort of used in Red Bull and Monster Energy, and it can be extracted from bull semen. It was first spotted in a 2016 supposed study by the Longhorn Cattle Co., where they found that Red Bull do indeed extract bull semen and put it into their drinks. This sort of study gets shared around on Facebook almost annually, going viral every time it's shared. Red Bull actually constantly debunk this, and on the frequently asked questions on their website, they have a section that said taurine in Red Bull is not derived from animals. They are 100% confirmed by PETA and other companies that there is no animal products in their drinks. Now, taurine can also be extracted from meat and fish, but it's a lot cheaper for Red Bull to simply make a synthetic taurine in a lab and put it in their drinks. And also they get that vegan certification. So yeah, do not fear. If you're a fan of energy drinks like Red Bull and Monster, you are not drinking bull semen. Talking Angela. Talking Angela was a popular children's app. I remember Talking Tom, which was the variation before Angela, but I don't actually remember Talking Angela. It's like a chat bot for kids, early AI sort of chat bot. It was in 2012. It was launched by a Slovenian company. And it sort of let kids chat to this cat-like figure in a French-style cafe, and it would just have really kid-friendly answers. I kind of remember one of my nephews using Talking Tom. But yeah, it was just a way for kids to engage with a really basic AI. Well, in 2013 and 14, rumors started to go around that Angela was asking children really personal questions, like trying to find out where they live, trying to find out how old they were, and trying to get them to do things that would I guess be illegal. People theorized that the Angela cat was getting their children to get naked in front of it, and the front camera was recording them, and there was some creepy dude on the other end of the app using all these images for his own personal pleasure. Talking about this stuff is so weird. It makes me uncomfortable. But thankfully, I don't think there's any proof that this was going on. I mean, by default, the app didn't have access to your front camera anyway. And a lot of the videos that went around online of Angela asking weird questions and supposedly a shadowy figure lurking in the background of this French-style cafe, they were all completely fake. However, it did cause a moral panic as it went viral, and apparently parents would uninstall the app en masse, and it sort of died because it lost so many users during these rumors, and it completely put people off from using it. And I mean, when it's your kids that you're trying to protect, I completely understand using caution. But yes, nothing to be worried about if you were to chat to Angela. AIDS Mary. AIDS Mary is an urban legend dating back to the 1980s during the AIDS crisis. It basically tells a story of a vengeful woman, or sometimes a man, that would have AIDS, and they would go around being sexually promiscuous, racking up as many sexual partners as they could to spread the disease. The legend even goes a step further and says that sometimes post-hookup, men would wake up to the girl not in their bed anymore, go to the bathroom, and the mirror would have a message in lipstick written on it saying something like "Welcome to AIDS" or "Congratulations, you now have AIDS." There was never actually any confirmed cases of someone being a known serial AIDS spreader, but I think it actually at the time probably just served as like a message. The AIDS crisis was real, and having a story of a person out there who is purposely spreading around AIDS kind of puts fear in you, I guess, and is a message to be more careful, use protection. Yeah, I think this is another one with a kind of message or a moral to the story. Stolen biscuits. Also known as the biscuit thief. If you're British, you probably know this one. If you're not British, perhaps you don't. It was actually popularized by Douglas Adams' book, The Salmon of Doubt. Two strangers would be sitting near each other while one of the strangers is quietly stealing biscuits from the other stranger's packet of biscuits. Even though the stranger one notices that his biscuits are being stolen by stranger two, it's a sort of a tale of British awkwardness, that they're both too awkward to say anything. Stranger two is too awkward to simply ask for a biscuit, while stranger one is too awkward to say anything, the fact that his biscuits are being stolen. And this is just like really old school British humor, I guess, and kind of true to this day about British people. We are awkward and we often don't speak up on things. I think this story actually probably does play out in some British households, maybe even to this day, where a family of four might share a pack of biscuits and someone will sneak out in the middle of the night to take their favorite biscuits from the biscuit box. For me, it would be the custard creams. If you're American and you've not had a chance to try a custard cream, get on that. I don't know where you can get them from in the States, but they're superior British biscuits. Comment your favorite biscuits down below. But after the custard creams would be gone in my house, because I've eaten them, my mom might go to the box next, open up the box, and where's the custard creams? Someone's stealing the biscuits. I would probably deny it and be like, oh, Who was it? It wasn't me. I could easily blame my brother. So yeah, this is more of a strange British anecdote than an urban myth or legend. Hippo eats dwarf. Now, have you ever been to the circus and seen a dwarf and a hippo performing together? Probably not, but if you ever had, maybe perhaps in the 80s, this used to happen more often, there was a certain circus that traveled around where the circus hippo was yawning and the dwarf fell into the hippo's mouth and the hippo ended up eating the dwarf. Now, I think this is just a really early example of a meme, quite a bad meme at that, I think. It first appeared in 1988 in the National Lampoon as a completely hoax, joke article. It's since popped up on the internet in different internet articles since. But yes, just a hoax story about a circus hippo eating a dwarf. Obama is a Muslim. Obama is a Muslim is a political conspiracy theory and rumor that spread around about Barack Obama while he was running for president. It basically stated that in 2008, he was lying about being a Christian, a Protestant. He was just going to churches for show, and he was actually a Muslim the whole time. The rumor spread because his middle name is Hussein, and his father has a Muslim background. His childhood years in Indonesia made the rumor feel plausible to people, and actually 18% of Americans believed it in 2010 while Obama was running. I don't think it's any surprise that the Americans that did believe it were Republicans mostly, and I think this is a really early example of a lie or a rumor, a political rumor spreading online about a political opponent of one party to try and take them down. I think that's exactly what this was. Republican Party members and Republican supporters would spread the rumor on social media sites, probably Facebook at the time, trying to bring down Obama and make people change their minds if they were voting on the fact that he was a Christian. Obama did directly bash down the claims, and he simply said, "I am, of course, a Christian." Shadow people. Remember the start of this video, we had Hatman. Well, essentially shadow people are the same thing. Hatman would be a type of shadow person, and shadow people show up in people that have sleep paralysis. They show up in the corners of the rooms, lurking, always watching them while they try and sleep. I can't say I've seen the Hatman, but I feel like I've definitely seen shadow people through absolute complete mental exhaustion, being sleep deprived, meth use. Not me personally. I'm just giving other reasons why people might see shadowy figures at the edge of their vision. So meth use, schizophrenia, dementia, paranoia are all reasons why people might see figures on the edge of their vision. And I'm pretty sure I have hallucinated, been sleep deprived to the point where I have started to see things in the corner of your eye, and you sort of glance at it, you go to look at it, and then there's nothing there when you do glance. Essentially, this is what shadow people are. I'm sure many of you watching have experienced this. The rake. The rake is another type of sleep paralysis demon, and it's kind of described exactly as shadow people. It has again been made popular through creepypastas online, and it normally lurks at the edges of people's bed and watches them. Some people describe it as being pale instead of shadowy, and it's described similarly to a skinwalker if you watch the last episode. And it's just been amplified. It's a modern day cryptid amplified through the internet, forums, and creepypastas. There's never any solid descriptions of the rake that I can find. Descriptions are so vague, it's sort of like skinwalkers, lets people fill in their own fear as to how they want to interpret it. Breaking a mirror. Breaking a mirror is a classic superstition. I think you've probably heard of it. The superstition goes, if you break a mirror, then you have 7 years of bad luck. The explanation for the bad luck is because the mirror is not just a reflection of you, it's a reflection of your soul. So therefore, you're breaking part of your soul that will go on to have 7 years of bad luck. Origins go all the way back to ancient Rome, where people believed that you lived 7-year cycles, so that a broken mirror would be bad luck for the rest of that cycle you were about to live. At the end of the 7-year cycle, your soul would renew and your luck would be refreshed. But if you do break a mirror, do not fear, because there is a fix. If you take the mirror outside and you bury it, making sure you bury all the broken shards, bad luck is removed. So remember that one if you ever break a mirror. Black Agnes. Black Agnes or Black Annis is a British folklore figure who's sort of like a boogeyman, or I suppose in this case a boogie woman from Leicestershire. She's described as a blue-faced hag or witch with iron claws, and she lives in a cave which she supposedly dug out with her claws. From her cave, she terrorizes misbehaving children, skinning them and then eating them. This is just an old school boogie woman to scare children into good behavior. Historians date this back to a Celtic goddess, or some even to a witch in medieval times. Historian Ronald Hutton suggests she was based on Agnes Scott, who was a 15th century nun who actually lived in the same caves that Agnes is said to live in. She was later demonized through superstition that she could be a witch. Vanishing Hitchhiker. The tale of the vanishing hitchhiker is an old one that transcends borders. It's a worldwide fame, and it tells the story of a hitchhiker. Upon getting in your car and taking them to the destination, upon arrival, you turn around and the hitchhiker's simply not there. Some versions of the story say that the hitchhiker gives clues that they died long ago during the journey through casual conversation, and then it's upon arrival, where they're not even there, you confirm that perhaps they have been dead this whole time, and you've just given a ride to a ghost. It's said to be one of the most widespread urban legends around the world, with it being particularly popular in South Africa, Korea, Ethiopia, Hawaii, and of course in America and the UK. It's believed to be so widespread because it mixes that loneliness with the travel element. Driving alone can be lonely. It can feel lonely. So perhaps people are making up figures that they're talking to while they're in their car. Some even convincing themselves that they have a hitchhiker aboard. Some also describe it as a cautionary tale upon picking up hitchhikers. I'm not really sure about that one. Because there's nothing too sinister about this. I guess it's just a bit eerie. When we think of hitchhikers, we think of modern day like motor vehicles. So maybe since like the 1930s, the 20s, maybe even. But the origins of this date back to the 1870s, maybe even older, of ghost riding traditions where people would pick up hitchhikers on their horse-drawn carriages, and it would turn out that the person they've picked up was indeed a ghost. They'd get to the destination, turn around, and they are nowhere to be seen. Urine detecting pool chemical. The urine detecting pool chemical is a common myth that I'm sure all of our parents told us when we were kids, or mine certainly did. Legend has it that swimming pools have a certain chemical in that if you decide to pee in the pool, it turns the water a different color. I was actually far too old when I found out that this was a myth. I remember it literally shattered all my life experiences when I found out this was a myth. I was literally terrified to pee in the pool as a kid because of this urine indicating dye, but I was happy to learn at the ages of 26 that it is indeed a myth, and I can now pee in the pool whenever I want. Ghost lights. Ghost lights is a broad categoric term for a type of folklore that is seen all around the world, where there's lights, unexplainable lights that are seen as maybe spirits, ghosts in some cases, or extraterrestrial intelligence that sort of float around and be in places where they shouldn't be. Different versions of the story tell the lights to be intelligent, and in some versions even misleading. As I said, some see them as spirits and souls, some perhaps see them as fairies, or even warning signs of death. There are many real-world observations of these lights that are explained as being atmospheric, especially around swamps and marshes. I remember I've read UFO reports before where people describe the UFOs that happen to be seen near swamps as simply being swamp gas. Apparently, when swamp gases get to a certain temperature, they can cause lights in the sky. These stories of ghost lights spread through oral traditions for many, many years, and that's why we see them cross borders and be told through different countries and in different cultures. Mystery Coke Machine. The Mystery Coke Machine was a nickname for a soda machine that appeared on Capitol Hill in Seattle. An old 1970s style Coke vending machine appeared in Seattle with these mystery buttons on in the early 90s. The machine became a cult attraction and then randomly disappeared in 2018. And then through the internet, on Reddit and different blogs, it became a cryptic local landmark. Upon putting money in the machine and hitting the mystery soda button, the machine would reliably spit out some rare, often expired old variations of Coke. The machine was always stocked, yet no one knew who the benefactor was. No one knew who was restocking the machine or who was gaining from it, that rumors started to spread that perhaps it was a ghost Coke machine. The mystery all added to the folklore, but unfortunately the machine randomly disappeared in 2018 without explanation, and it's never appeared since. While I think ghosts would probably have better things to do than restock a Coke machine, this one sure is interesting. Who's behind this random old mystery Coke machine? It's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun hobby for someone who knows what's going on here. And it's a shame they got rid of it. And I would even go a step further to say perhaps they got rid of it because it became so popular. The whole idea about something like this is that it should be largely unknown and have a small cult following. The fact that it went viral online sort of takes the whole magic away from it. But either way, pretty cool entry. I wish I got to get at Mystery Coke. Boy Scout Lane. Boy Scout Lane refers to a remote dirt road in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Local legend says an entire Boy Scout troop were driving along in their bus on an expedition where they crashed, they came off the dirt road, and they all died in a fiery blaze. The road is on private property nowadays, so it's not accessible by anyone, but it is a real road. However, there's no confirmed deaths of any Boy Scouts dying on the road. The legend appears to be an urban myth created in the 80s and 90s by teens to explain why the road feels so eerie. On the internet, through blogs that explore haunted roads in America, the story has evolved over time with different variations, some saying that the Boy Scouts leader actually murdered them all, and this adds further to the story. Some variations also say that there was a huge forest fire, that while they were setting up their camp, this is what killed the entire Boy Scout troop. Either way, in local records, there is no documented cases of a Boy Scout troop all perishing in the woods or down this particular road. Crop circles. Crop circles were popularized in the 80s and 90s across England and Wales, where crazy geometric patterns would appear in fields of wheat. Media coverage of these really exploded in the 90s, and it's often stated that the cause of these crop circles is UFOs that have landed down in farmers' fields. Often in some crop circle sites, people cite things like radiation damage to the plants, saying that it must have been caused by some kind of landing craft with microwave technology. However, this is to the extent that this scientific evidence goes. However, there are some really cool and interesting looking crop circles out there. There's actually a group called Crop Circle Makers. Their website is cropcirclemakers.org, and they have been making crop circles across the UK since 1991. Also, famously, two guys, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, famously admitted to creating a whole bunch of crop circles just to freak people out. And they started doing that in 1978. So I think it's a kind of fun art project, you could call it, that people took up to kind of spook people. And some of them actually do look really cool. Faces on Mars. In 1976, the Viking 1 satellite captured this image from the surface of Mars. People claim this photo shows a fallen face of some sort that has perhaps been carved out of stone, and it's evidence of a fallen Martian city. Now, as mentioned earlier, we have pareidolia coming into effect, and I really do like the explanation of this. There is scientific explanation. The human brain likes to see faces. It's like if you look at the sky and you see a face in the clouds, your brain wants to make that image. We're wired to recognize faces. So that's what's seen going on here. More high-res images have been taken of the same area since, and apparently this just now shows natural geology. It's natural erosion of a hill. I'm not a geologist. I'm not qualified to say if this is natural geology, but I'm pretty sure that it's not. I'm pretty sure it's not evidence of a fallen Martian city. Dover Demon. Dover Demon is a 3 to 4 foot tall orange hairless alien sighting from April 1977. 3 teenagers reported seeing the creature over 2 separate nights. Now, there are no more confirmed sightings in the area. It was literally just these 2 nights that it was seen. And they created this iconic sketch of the creature that they said they saw. There's no other physical evidence. All we have to go by is these 3 teenagers that said they saw it and their sketch. Skeptic Lorne Coleman has said that perhaps these teenage boys saw a fawn, a deer fawn, walking, struggling to walk maybe in the distance. It would match the height. It would appear like it had spider-like legs. So perhaps it can simply be explained as a little fawn. Jack the Ripper. It's likely you know who Jack the Ripper is. He's an unidentified serial killer that operated in Whitechapel, London. He's said to have at least 5 victims, but there are many urban myths surrounding Jack the Ripper. The first myth involving Jack the Ripper comes from the name itself. The name Jack the Ripper comes from a letter that was signed, the Dear Boss letter, that was written to the police, and it signed off Jack the Ripper. It's instead believed that, in fact, a journalist wrote this letter, and it was sensationalized to sort of make the story bigger in London at the time. There was also myths that the killer had some kind of surgical training. It must have been a surgeon or perhaps even a butcher, but there is really no evidence. If you look at the bodies, they are brutally hacked apart. Anyone with a knife could have done this. You don't need any sort of surgical training to just hack up a body. There was hundreds of suspects of who Jack the Ripper could be. One of the suspects was a local butcher whose life was totally ruined by the claims, and even royal surgeons were accused. Going a bit deeper, it's also not even proven that Jack the Ripper had 5 victims. It could have been way more. It could have been less. We don't know for sure that it was one serial killer who took all of these 5 women's lives. There are many myths surrounding the Ripper, and to this day, unfortunately, we still don't know his true identity. D.B. Cooper. Now, D.B. Cooper is a completely true story. I'm actually struggling to find the myths here of an unidentified man who hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft flying from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. In 1971, he told flight crews he had a bomb, and he demanded $200,000, which is the equivalent of $1.6 million in today's money. Upon arriving in Seattle, he expected the $200,000 and 4 parachutes. The FBI granted this request. Somehow he got the money, he got the parachutes, and he even had his flight refueled, and he was said to be heading to Mexico City. It was on his way to Mexico City, he opened the doors and he jumped out of the plane with the money in tow. He parachuted to an uncertain fate over a heavy wooded area in Washington, and he has never been found. This case remains the only unsolved US air hijacking case in American history. In the 1980s, a small amount, I think it was about $6,000 of the ransom money was recovered in a river near Vancouver, South Washington. The discovery renewed public interest, and the FBI kept the case open for another 45 years, and it was closed in 2016, still with the suspect unidentified. I suppose some of the myths around this case are what happened to D.B. Cooper. Some suggest that he survived and he lived happily ever after with the money off-grid somewhere, being able to hide for many years. Others assume, and more likely in my opinion, he would have passed away. He was parachuting into a storm apparently that night, and in a heavy remote area of wilderness in Washington. I can't imagine survival was too likely, unless this guy was like the ultimate survivor. The Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was a merchant ship sailing from New York to Genoa, Italy in 1872. It was carrying a load of alcohol for industrial purposes, but it was found by British forces just off the coast of Spain, completely abandoned. The sails were up and the ship was completely intact, just a little bit of water in the hull, but otherwise it was in great condition. And there was no crew and no captain to be found. The only thing missing was the single lifeboat that was on board the ship. The British inquiry found no foul play, no piracy, and no mutiny on board the ship. It's assumed that perhaps the captain feared that there was going to be an explosion due to the alcohol fumes, and he ordered everyone abandon the ship immediately, which could be the case. But the location of the crew has never been discovered. Let's be real, they're likely at the bottom of the ocean. But many urban myths say they were taken by ghost pirates. Perhaps you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean. Perhaps they were caught by the Black Pearl. Soloway Firth Spaceman. A 1964 photograph taken by a firefighter, Jim Templeton, shows his daughter Elizabeth. We see here Elizabeth posing while there's a white-suited spaceman figure standing behind her in Cumbria, England. Upon getting the photos developed, Jim Templeton swore there was no one there at the time and that this is some kind of alien or spaceman figure. Local newspapers eventually picked the photo up, and then it spread to worldwide UFO magazines. Kodak analyzed the picture and they confirmed that there was no tampering. It was a completely original photo. It's been over 50 years and there's no answer to what this could be in the background of the photo. However, some people have simply suggested it could be Elizabeth's mother wearing a white dress. It's slightly overexposed, she's blurred in the background, and with film photos, you don't always remember when they were taken. It would be hard to remember who was there at the time. This is a simple explanation for perhaps a spooky picture. Cattle mutilations. If you're into cryptids or UFOs and aliens, you would have likely heard of cattle mutilations. There's been many stories over many years that cattle get mutilated all around the world for a variety of different reasons and in a variety of different ways. Since the 1960s, cattle has been found with precise surgical cuts, missing organs, slight wounds where blood has been completely drained. I think we had the Chupacabra from the first installment of this series, who is known to just drain the blood from cattle, leaving barely a mark. Now, this is a very real phenomenon. There's been many cattle mutilations that don't completely add up. Like I say, missing organs, surgical cuts, the blood being completely drained. But people try and explain these through natural phenomena. Of course, this is like a really good evidence piece for people that believe in UFOs or cryptids, because it is bizarre, some of these cases. Certain UFO books claim that aliens use laser surgery to hook out the organs that they need to consume to maintain life, while other skeptics simply say that these are coyotes, perhaps wolves, or even like things like birds. Birds are known to peck out the eyes of different animals. They could just take the eyes from cattle and be done with it. But I'm not sure. I think cattle mutilations could be further researched, perhaps in the category of what the hell is going on. Yeti. The Yeti, or sometimes known as the Abominable Snowman, is Bigfoot's big brother, or perhaps little brother, that resides in the Himalayas. Literally, think Bigfoot. You know the Yeti. Think Bigfoot, but long, white, shaggy hair instead of brown hair, roaming around the mountains of Nepal. The first reports of the Yeti originate from an Everest expedition from 1921 by a Lieutenant Colonel Charles Howard Bury. He said he saw strange footprints in the mountains, also collaborated by his guides. In 1951, the Yeti went global when Eric Shipton took these photos of large footprints in the snow at 20,000 feet up Everest. The photo sparked global interest in the Yeti. And it's also said that in local folklore, Nepalese and Tibetan folklore, the Yeti isn't necessarily meant to be feared. He's a bit like Bigfoot. He's a guardian of the mountains, just like Bigfoot is a guardian of the forest. Some Buddhism teachings teach seeing the Yeti in the mountains as a bad omen, but like I say, others don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. In more recent years, we have a 2011 claim from Russia where they came out and they said they have 95% evidence that the Yeti is real. And in 2019, the Indian Army tweeted that they saw footprints in the snow near Everest, claiming that it could be the creature. It's pretty cool, the idea that this giant abominable snowman is living at the top of Mount Everest, just chilling, minding his own business. He's not actually causing harm to anyone. And perhaps the Indian Army were the last to see him in 2019. Walt's frozen head. I think this is one that we all know as well. Walt Disney supposedly cryogenically froze himself, or in this case, just his head, so that he could come back to life at some point when they could find a way to extend his life. Some people claim that it's only his head that's been preserved, while others say that he's in a tank somewhere waiting to be cured of any diseases that he had when he died. The obvious place for him to be stored would obviously be Disneyland, but it gets a little bit more specific, and people say that he's under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. The rumors likely emerged from the fact that Disney always said that he wanted to be immortal, and he had really high interest in the technology of the time. But cryogenics wasn't invented till a year after he died, which to me is actually quite interesting, because if it was invented a year after he died, maybe that's when it was made public and made known. Maybe he was the first case scenario. He has a lot of money to fund something like that. It's not out of the question. However, officially, Walt Disney was cremated when he died of lung cancer in 1966, and his ashes were spread on Forest Lawn. Robert the Doll. Again, I guess similar to Annabelle here, we have Robert the Doll, a really creepy looking 40-inch doll. It's currently housed at the East Metello Museum in West Keys, Florida. It was bought in 1904 by painter Robert Eugene Otto, and it's associated with a curse. If you mock the doll, then you would have great misfortunes. The painter who owned it said his life was a series of misfortunes due to the doll, causing illness in family members, accidents, and even death. It's said that you can write an apology letter to the doll and it may forgive you and lift any curses. At the museum, you can actually write an apology letter and leave it there for the doll, if you ever decide to mock it, I suppose. Krampus. Krampus is the horned demonic counterpart to Saint Nicholas, Father Christmas, or Santa. He's depicted like a devil, with goat horns and fangs, and he's said to always carry a chain. And if you've been bad on December the 5th, he will come and whack you with birch sticks. And if you've been especially bad, then he will come and even take you away. Some places in Austria and Bavaria even hold festivals for Krampus to this day on December the 5th. And he sort of had a revival in 2015 as the movie Krampus was released. Phoenix Lights. On March the 13th, 1997 in Arizona, this triangle light formation flew over the skies of Arizona. This is probably the biggest mass sighting event that people claimed was a UFO. There was thousands of reports over the city of Phoenix that these lights were hovering really slowly above the city. I actually have a video about different UFO sightings if you want to check it out. The Phoenix Lights does appear in my first rendition of it, so yeah, check them both out if you're more interested in the UFO stuff. But this was simply explained as the government as being a flare drop test, where they dropped over 1,000 flares. Again, with the UFO stuff, it's like, are you just saying that? Is that a cover up? Or did that happen? Who really knows? But thanks for getting through part 2 of the Myths and Legends Iceberg. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you're subscribed, ready for part 3 next week.